everybody. My name is Cristina Flaschen. I'm the CEO here at Pandium, and I'm here to talk about capturing data to prove your ROI. So first of all, who am I, and why should any of you listen to me? So again, my name is Cristina, and I've been working in technology for 15 years with a focus on integration that entire time. So spanning enterprise technology when integration was really focused on large companies that had massive budgets, all the way to what we see today, where we have folks like you guys working at medium, large, or even very small software companies and using integration as a part of your revenue stream. In my role here at Pandium and prior, I've worked with hundreds of partner leaders, perhaps thousands, could be, and have really gotten to know some of the ups and downs, the kinks, and the best practices around building partner programs at scale. And some of the apps that I've built power thousands of businesses across industries and verticals. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and if anyone wants to chat about any of that at any point, please let me know. So what have I learned during this time? It's that tech partnerships are hard. And I'm seeing a lot of people saying yes. One of the reasons that technology partnerships are hard is that it's a relatively new form of partnership. So a lot of companies may have reseller, channel, agency partners, influencers, but this technology partnership thing is new for a lot of companies. And it's hard to find folks that have any real level of experience with this more than a few years. So with that, there can be a murky definition of success, and we'll talk today about what you can gather to help prove the success of your program, but it can be difficult to establish KPIs when you're doing this role for the first time, or your organization is as well. Anytime you have murky definitions of success, getting exec buy-in is going to be a challenge. Additionally, tech partnerships are interesting because they span many departments. Typically, when you're looking at channel or agency or reseller, it kind of sits squarely in marketing and business development. But technology partnerships have technology that underpin them. So it's not just biz dev and marketing, it's also product engineering and then customer support to help make these things successful. As mentioned, this is a largely greenfield thing for a lot of companies. They'll hire a partner manager, maybe a very first one, someone who maybe was promoted from a different department, and expect them to just come up with what is going to be successful for this. And whenever we're talking about engineers, we're looking at things that have competing priorities. I think anyone who has been working in technology partnerships for more than a couple of years has had the conversation with a product leader or an engineering leader around what you need for your API support, what you need for your partner support, and there's always going to be something else that is more cool to work on, inevitably. So with all of those things, why are we doing this? Because technology partnerships are important. And I'm assuming most of you folks in the audience here know that because you're probably working at a tech company. But beyond just having a job in technology partnerships and knowing that it's important because it's your job, we see that companies that have strong tech partnerships have reduced churn, better NPS scores, your customers are happier, you have a higher ACV, shorter sales cycles, which all of you guys want, and you can really create brand advocates out of your customers. So when you are an integral part of the modular, composable tech stack of your B2B users, your customers will love you more than if you're just this point solution that's sitting on an island somewhere without that interoperability. So let's dive into acquisition. I think everybody here knows that it is way more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain one. In fact, it's 5 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than to sell to an existing customer. The interesting stat that we found is that Bain found that a 5% increase in retention can lead to a 25 to 95% increase in overall revenue. Just small bridge there, 25 to 95. And if retention is so important to SaaS companies, where do partnerships come in? Partner-supported customers who are integrated are retained longer and spend more. What we see is when customers adopt one or more integrations, we see an increase of about 15 to 14% in retention, and that retention continues to increase as more integrations are adopted. But how do you prove that? You got to track the data, which is what we're going to talk about here today. So most organizations aren't capturing influence. So this is what happens when you can't prove your value. You've got sales, CS, marketing, the CEO, the executive team, everyone feels great. There's all this new business, your customers are stoked, and you're there holding up this entire exercise all by yourself because you don't have the data to prove the impact of your program. What does that mean? You're the unsung hero of your organization. And many organizations aren't collecting this data properly from the very beginning of their ecosystem. So I would bet, I'm sure there's a lot of folks in here that have a very robust ecosystem, but also probably a lot that are kind of mid-level, still figuring this out. It's really important to put the cornerstones of data collection in place at the beginning. Anecdotally, I'll say I've talked to like hundreds of companies and companies that have thousands or even tens of thousands of employees that I think a lot of us would look at and say, oh my God, their ecosystem is amazing, they have it all together. And when you really start to chat with them, it's like, oh no, we have an army of people that we have to enable just to pull data because the foundation wasn't put there in the beginning. And there are some very simple things that you can put in at the start. So what are we going to be covering? The different types of data that you should be collecting, how to analyze it, companies who are doing this well, and how to approach common hurdles to success. To gather the data, you need to have 3 basic buckets. One is integration, product usage, and analytics. That's probably coming from your product team. The second is partner sourced and influence data, which is likely from sales and marketing, or maybe you guys actually have that in your partnership org. And finally, you'll be tapping your customer support channel to find out about retention, satisfaction, CSAT, NPS, all those fun acronyms that we all know and love. How do you track integration usage? So this is a fun one. Unless you have already invested in a tool, you'll likely need to ask product and engineering for help in figuring out who is installing these apps and how they're using them. So you not only want visibility into the customers that are using the apps, but also the usage itself can be a proxy for health and kind of the success of a customer. You may also need to coordinate with your partners who have built apps into your own ecosystem to be able to get data from them on adoption, which is something you may not already have. To help alleviate some of this partner tracking, it's best practice to build into your authentication both a way to discover what customer is using an app, so that's typically the API key, and also if that app was registered by a partner. So again, I think those of us that have worked in tech for any period of time have been through the situation where a product leader comes over to your team and says, hey, this customer is using the API like crazy, what are they doing? CS gives them a call, they say, oh, we're using that new integration that so-and-so built and is marketing for the last 3 months. Your partner team has no idea about that. You can prevent that from happening if you have an app registration process where your partners have to say who they are when an app is being used. So in order to track partner-sourced data, you must put in processes and a tech stack that surface both the influence data as well as direct deals. So what would we recommend that you implement for some of these things? One, I love Gong and Avoma. I think those are amazing tools that you can then use, and I'm looking at some folks here that I know use it really well, that you can use to then tag both customer calls and sales calls with partner and integration related tags. So it could be specific partners, or it can be just the word integration. There's great data that can go into that if you have a really large sample set. Obviously, PRMs, partner tech, something great like Crossbeam that's integrated with your CRM to give you, hopefully, a single pane of glass into all of the mentions that your customers are giving and all of the influence and sourced revenue. Marketing automation should have a place for partner source revenue. And then your CRM is obviously going to be the place where you have all of the information about your customer, hopefully from your CX team too, anything that they're looking for in an integration or a partner. So organizations should also track satisfaction, retention, and ACV as it relates to ecosystem. So the good news is that your organizations are probably already tracking this because it is like the gold standard for SaaS companies. If you're at any scale, you most likely have some sort of NPS or CSAT scores. But you can kind of pivot this a little bit to work with your ecosystem strategy, to work with your customer support team and make sure that they are capturing when the customers passively ask for something from a new partner or passively say an integration is really broken and they can't use it. Having places in your CRM to track that will help you understand what the actual impact is and can help you forge stronger partnerships with your partners based on your customer feedback. Additionally, Avoma, I mentioned before, is a great way to get live feedback, essentially, and also to hear how your team is talking about partners and integrations. I just can't stress Avoma and Gong enough. I think they're great. You can also reach out to your partners to get integration feedback. They might be getting feedback about you as an organization. I would highly recommend introducing your customer support teams to each other. Your customer support team is going to essentially be supporting an external system if it is an app that you built, so having a direct line between them can be fantastic. I know we all are in a lot of Slack channels, but it does work until there's something a little bit better. And to take this just a little bit further, you can also bake analytics into your app catalog. So even though you may have customers that are visiting your catalog and not installing any of the apps, if you see that you have a ton of traffic to that Salesforce tile, lots of people are hanging out there to learn more, that might be a great opportunity to bring that to your product team and say, hey, I actually have data now to show that this is something that our customers are interested in. I find that presenting these things in the places that your customers already hang out is a lot more effective than surveys. Surveys can just be, people blow them off. Cool, so let's look at a company that has done this really well. So ShipBob is a 3PL provider. They're worth well over $1 billion. And a few years ago, they had little visibility into their integration usage and analytics. So partners had built stuff into them that they didn't know about. They had built some stuff, but there was no centralized place to both expose their merchants to integrations or to see the usage and analytics themselves. They were also spending a lot of developer time supporting integrations, but were not really able to articulate what the ROI of that was. Was this actually useful? Should we be doing this? So their head of product decided to standardize and centralize all of their integrations into one place. And that visibility allowed them to track, the traffic to that marketplace experience, which is really useful, as well as the leads that were coming from partners and flowing to partners, and gave them the metrics that they could then bring to do the analysis on things like net retention, things on upsells. They were able to then show that there was a substantial business impact from all of that developer work. They found that customers who were integrated with more than 2 systems had a lower churn and a higher ACV, and the NPS for customers that had more than 5 apps installed was 10 points higher than those that had less than 4. They were also able to 300% their revenue share for partner-driven revenue, and they ended up investing in building out the team when the director of product actually moved into being the director of partnerships. So now that you have some of this data, let's talk about how we're going to segment it. So hopefully you have a really large cohort of data because you have 1 billion apps and you also have a bunch of customers. But making sure that you're comparing apples to apples is really important. So first, you want to segment your integrations based on the type, and I would call like the business critical nature. So if you're a company that requires sales order data to be successful, being able to sync that data from Shopify is really mission critical and important and should be bundled separate from something like maybe Slack notifications when an order is shipped. You should also segment your customer base. So if you have like an SMB customer that logs into your app once a week, maybe you want to segment them separately from enterprise customers that use your app all day, every day, because you'd expect those behavior patterns to be different. I would also say that it's good to look at the depth of an integration. So even if you're integrating with something like a storefront, like a Shopify or a Wix or something like that, if the integration only syncs a subset of data that's not useful to your customer, that should be segmented separately from your super robust NetSuite integration. And so once you have all of this data, and hopefully you have a ton, you can look for correlations between what customers are doing with these apps and their usage and retention. I will also say, though, a lot of folks and a lot of companies are not going to have massive data sets. If you sell into enterprises or if you have a lot less integrations, but they're more highly adopted, you may not be able to draw quite as many correlations between these segments. So really kind of looking at the qualitative data, the feedback from your customer interviews, assessing their tech stack, really getting close with your CS team will help you determine the value of these apps. So if we look at another company, LeagueApps is a sports tech company, and they process almost $1 billion in transactions annually. So prior to 2020, they had no centralized place for app installation or to discover new apps or monitor them at all. They had partners, again, that had built into them. They had some folks on their team that had built some things, but there was really no way to know what the success of this entire exercise was. So they launched their App Center in 2020. And since then, they've 6x'd the number of integrations that they have and are building approximately 2 to 3 per quarter. And the goal of this was to help their customers who are youth sports organizations and the members, which are parents and athletes, operationalize their day-to-day work. So they segment their integrations into 2 key buckets. One is customer and member value, which are your sort of like business endemic tools, like your MailChimps, QuickBooks Online, things of that nature that a normal SMB would use. And then the second was things that were sports specific. So registration management, sports insurance, background checks, things that are really focused on sports tech. And what they found was that in their highest priority segment, there was 36% adoption of integrations, which is a key metric that they track across all of their customers. They also had 70% lower churn amongst customers that had 1 integration enabled, and that number continued to increase as they had more. So what do you do if your organization doesn't have the data and does not want to help you collect the data? How do we overcome some of these hurdles? So become BFFs with product and engineering. Easier said than done, and I don't actually think you have to be BFFs necessarily, but having a good relationship with product and engineering as a tech partner manager is only going to help you. Even if it's someone a little more junior, knowing what is coming on the roadmap, being able to get questions answered, maybe even getting them to get on the phone with a partner if they're having issues, is just totally invaluable. And one way that you can do that beyond buying lunch for them or buying drinks for them is to start small. So this is going to sound very self-serving, but when you're trying to prove the value of these things, pick a metric, cherry pick a metric that you think is going to be good, start tracking that first, and start sharing that within the organization. If you're able to share successes with especially folks from P&E, because product managers love to ship stuff, they're going to be more incentivized to help you out in the future. Along those lines, celebrate the wins company-wide. I was just chatting with someone before this about how CX is sort of like the unsung hero of an organization. And because this endeavor really does touch, I think, almost every part of an organization, maybe people ops doesn't do this, but maybe they do. Being able to really share all of those wins, even if they're a little bit data that you picked out yourself, within the organization will help everyone get excited and aligned around your goals to make your ecosystem successful. If you sign a new deal, it's not just sales. If you have a customer that doesn't upsell, it's not just CX. If you launch new integration, it's basically everybody. So really having splashy launches, do these things at all hands, have quarterly meetings, builds a sort of internal culture of ecosystem, and we've seen some companies do that really, really well and be very successful. And then lastly, it's a little nuanced. Ask for what you need, not what you know exists. So if you go to your product team and you say, hey, what do we know about app installations? They're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about, or maybe nothing, or maybe they do have some data. Or if you go to CX and you say, hey, what are you guys tracking about customers that work with our partners? They're going to be like, probably don't know what you're talking about. So instead of asking them to do the work for you, make a plan of the data that you think that you need to be able to validate and show the ROI for your partner program, and bring it to them. Just like we would do with anything else. Instead of coming with a problem, you come with a solution. You may not get everything that you want, but it at least shows that you're being thoughtful and not expecting that other folks are going to give this to you. And then again, when they do give it to you, you get to celebrate the wins together. So in closing, no matter what stage your data collection is in, it's super important to continue to evangelize that you track as much as humanly possible. Schedule your quarterly meetings with internal stakeholders, constantly beat the drum of success, share all the cool stuff that everyone on the team is building, and by doing this, you guys will close more deals, you'll have a higher ACV, your customers will be your champions, and you'll be able to scale out your ecosystem. And that is it. Thanks for the talk, everybody.